Welcome, everyone. We are going to wait for just one second to bring some other folks in, and then we will get started. But thanks so much for joining us today. And we're so grateful to have you here. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll bring other people in as they come. But we are incredibly honored to be able to welcome into the Collaborative and Community Engaged Scholarships series, Lunch and Learn series on Community Engaged Scholarship and partnerships. Today, we are welcoming Dr. Brian McAdoo, Delphine Sellers, and Rue Jackson into our sphere, although each of them has been engaged in the collaborative in a lot of different ways. So we will discuss that as well. Today, we will be discussing their collaboration, Surviving the Anthropocene by Growing Communities One Seed at a Time, with Catawba Trails Farm. We are, again, as I said, incredibly grateful for the work that they're doing in the world and for their willingness to share it with us today. We are recording, just so you know, and we will be sharing this out later on, so just keep that in mind. If you do have any questions today for any of our speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat. They will be presenting, and then we will be taking questions at the end. So just to present our illustrious speakers today, who we are so grateful to have join us. Delphine Sellers is a co-founder and executive director of Urban Community Agronomics, which is a nonprofit organization here in Durham. It focuses on integrating agriculture into the wealth, health, and well-being of urban communities. In 2016, she retired as director of the Community Durham Center of North Carolina Cooperative Extension and Durham County Government Departmental Director. Prior to joining the Durham workforce, Mrs. Sellers served as the director of the Center for Employment Training and Adult Vocational Education Program. Was a social worker focusing on youth and assistant director of an adult nonviolence pre-release facility. She is the director, as I said, executive director of UCAN, Urban Community Agronomics, and she is also going to be discussing today the role of Catawba Trail Farm in UCAN's mission and how it's moving forward that change in the world. Dr. Brian McAdoo is an associate professor of Earth and Climate Sciences and head of the Planet Lab at Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment. Both his teaching and research are centered around the understanding of Earth systems and community resilience to reduce suffering due to global change. In service of this goal, he is supporting research on how climate change is impacting health and well-being in the Himalaya and how changes in lemur habitat at Madagascar might affect disease exchange between these primates and human communities. And he'll be talking today about work closer to home to trying to understand how well-prepared emergency services are in the face of increasing extreme weather, and his work directly with Catawba Trail Farms and UCAN. We are actually extremely excited as well to welcome into our Zoom lunch room Rue Jackson, who is a graduate student at Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment, she is in pursuit, or they in pursuit of obtaining their BS at Colorado State University, and then they received the University Honors Distinction and were on the Dean's List all 4 years. They merged their love of botany with their passion for social justice in their undergraduate career and are currently practicing this union at Duke. Once they receive their MEM, they plan to work on the federal or state level as a landscape conservation biologist. And it is their goal to make sure the voices of underrepresented communities are heard as they continue to fight environmental injustices. Again, we are incredibly grateful for welcoming all of these really powerful community engaged scholars into our Lunch and Learn session today. And I will go ahead and let them take it away.
Okay, let's start. Good morning or good afternoon to each of you. I'm Delphine Sellers, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Urban Community Agronomics, We're located in northern Durham County on what was once a plantation. The reason that we exist, however, is to see if what we can do to help people to become resilient, create better health and knowledge as far as how they can control their own health and well-being, and to provide a community of like-minded individuals who are interested really in everyone, welcoming all people regardless. We focus on impacting the academic success of children, uh, reversing and or preventing health issues that are because of due to a lack of access, which includes what can I say, healthy, nutritious food, but access to open green spaces and a peaceful and healing place. So we are embarked on reclaiming this once vibrant plantation, which has not been touched in over 70, now close to 80 years, and making it a place of healing and resource for the community. So I will turn that over to Brian.
Thanks, Delphine. I've only been in Durham now for just over 2.5 years. It seems a little bit longer than that, doesn't it, Delphine? But one of the first things I did when I got here, when I met Nikki Cagle, who's our diversity, equity, and inclusion officer here at Nicholas School, she said, "Hey, Brian, you got to meet Miss Delphine Sellers out at UCAN." I said, "Okay, okay." I kind of put it off for a little bit. She's like, "Brian, you meet Delphine?" I said, "No, no, I'm getting there, getting there." Then eventually, my wife and I took our bicycles and we rode out to this place called Catawba Trail Farm or something. And I said, "Well, let me see what it's all about." And we got there, and sure enough, we met Miss Delphine there right off the bat, and she just welcomed us in and she showed us around. And I said, "Whoa, right now I see what Nikki's talking about." Because I mean, you talk about a font of knowledge we have in our community, and knowledge is one thing and vision is quite another. And when she explained to me her vision of the space, it reminded me of my time growing up here. I spent my summers in Greensboro, North Carolina. My grandparents had a little bit of property out there. But just being outside and being close to where your food is grown, that instills a certain amount of resilience in a person, which is going back to the core of what we do in our lab. So I quickly allowed Delphine to take me under her wing as yet another acolyte of the Catawba Trail Farm, and realized there's a lot we can learn by partnering with Catawba Trail Farms and urban community agronomics, and learning how people in the community are preparing for these changes that we're definitely seeing right now, changes in terms of climate and that sort of thing, but also economic changes with pandemics and with different shifts in inflation and economy, all the things that impact our communities, our homes, our people. I believe that the vision that they're implementing out at UCAN and Catawba Trail Farms is really going to help with that. So I teach a class here at Duke. I was given a charge of teaching a class called Exploring Our Sciences. It's meant to be a hands-on kind of course that looks into how do you get, how do you actually look at things and see the complexity in the environment. We chose to take a look at 3 different natural resources we have right here in North Carolina that can help us survive all these changes we're seeing during this time we call the Anthropocene, where we're going through lots of global change being caused by humans. One resource we looked at is lithium. They're mining lithium down in southern part of North Carolina. The second resource we're looking at is potential for using geothermal to help find carbon neutral heating and cooling for our campus here in Durham, and possibly helping the people also out in our community. But the third we're looking at is soil and the earth we live on here. And when I learned about, I don't know anything about farming, so I kind of go to the experts. That's how we met Delphine and the rest of the team out at UCAN. And Delphine, should I call it, when we call it in short, do we call it UCAN or do we call it Catawba Trail Farms?
It's actually Catawba Trail Farm. UCAN is the 501c3 nonprofit, and the Catawba Trail Farm is the mechanism to which we implement in our mission and our
Gotcha.
purpose. Yeah.
All right, I'll stick with that now then. That I like Catawba Trail Farms. It's a beautiful, special place. And if you haven't been out there, anybody who's going to be watching this, hopefully on the recording or is here, I highly recommend going out there on one of their Saturday mornings. They got an extraordinary community out here. I mean, I think last Saturday, Miss Delphine, you must have had, what, 50 different people out there in 3 or 4 different groups? At
If
least.
not more, yes.
Yeah. So it's an exciting, vibrant place, and they're doing a lot of good work out there. I'll pass it off to Rue, who could talk a little bit about the work that they're involved in out there also.
Yeah, I feel like everyone who talks about Catawba Trail Farms, it all is the same as far as we get to the census of it feels like home, honestly. My experience visiting Catawba Trail Farms was similar. I came out with a field trip with Liz's community-based environmental management class. Um, and it took me maybe 5 minutes volunteering in the community garden for me to be like, this is something special. And I would be honored to be a part of this. And so I showed enthusiasm similar to Dr. McAdoo, and Miss Delphine also let me under her wing. Sorry, my cat thinks I'm talking to her. But as far as my specific project, I am focusing on seeing how Catawba Trail Farms can expand. Ms. Delphine is focusing on a returning citizens project. Again, just that theme of home and caring for the community. So with that, we have formerly incarcerated citizens who have an interest in agriculture, but they have nowhere to really express it. And Miss Delphine and Miss Lucille, they got a grant to clear 2 acres of land. And so with that, my project has been kind of looking at the land and finding a way to tell the story of the land. And I have had so much fun this year as far as highlighting those themes of traditional and ecological knowledge, and looking at stakeholder analysis and seeing how Catawba Trail Farms can partner with other similar organizations who work with those at-risk communities. Yeah, that's just a little overview, but I'm happy to jump into it more.
So, I mentioned that I teach a class out there, and part of the educational mission of Catawba Trail Farm, I believe, is also education and outreach. So I could tell you a little bit about the course we're running, because I think it fits in nicely with the work that Rue is doing and also the kind of overall mission of the place. But before I do that, I want to get up a little bit of space for maybe for Delphine to give us an overview of this mission of the Catawba Trail Farm, and just kind of tell us what your vision is for the space, and then how both Rue's work fits into it and my work also fits into it. You can pass it off to us after that. How's that sound?
Well, that sounds good. You just have to stop me now because I do get carried away because this is my joy. Okay.
We see you, Delphine. We see you. I'll cut you off with the quickness. Liz, make sure I can hit mute on her when I need to.
Okay. At the Catawba Trail Farm, we have this multi-purpose. Number one is to help minorities, to give them space, but also to bring back some personal value and sense of wellness as far as what our space is in our realities as far as this world is concerned. When you think about a plantation and you think about farming, and I will speak for myself and many who come to the farm, it is not necessarily received with warm, caring feeling, because most of the time you associate, as far as African Americans are concerned, you associate farming with slavery. So what we're trying to do is to help individuals to see that no, there's a legacy that was left to us in agriculture, and we need to start benefiting from that legacy. So what we're going to do is we're going to teach you, and you're going to teach us, and we're going to all learn to appreciate the legacy that was left to us in agriculture and the benefits of it. There is nothing better than growing your own food. It creates a sense of wealth, and it creates a sense of pride. But however, being on a former plantation, there's so many other things that we do. Recently, for example, we knew that there was always a gravesite on this property. It was the first European that actually owned the land, William Johnston. But through the help of Dr. McAdoo and his team, we found that not only is there a grave site, or let's say a grave ledger for Mr. Johnston, but there are also what we feel are interred enslaved individuals on this property. So another way to bring back a sense of honor to the community that is most disenfranchised and marginalized is let's honor this place that hold our ancestors. We are collaborators. We are partners, and we strongly believe in networks. So through working with the Stagville State Plantation or State Park or historic site, we've been able to actually identify the enslaved that actually worked on this property and some of their living descendants at this point. So in honoring that grave, the grave site, we will honor those who were interred, but also give homage to their ancestors. Now, on the farm, you talk health and healness. When you actually enter it, you're actually walking on part of the great Native American trading path. Okay. One of the reasons that we call this farm Catawba Trail Farm is because the first Native Americans who were guides to the Europeans were the Catawba Native Americans here in North Carolina or on the coast, and because they knew more dialects. So we honored them in terms of our name of the land. But on this land, there are buildings that we're restoring. We're in the process of restoring an old mill house so that we can start providing, really doing seed to table once again. The goal is to eventually have what I call a true, and the key word is community agricultural center that will have corn crib that is being repurposed into an intergenerational house because the young people have a lot to learn from us, believe it or not, even though we're aged, but we have just as much to learn from them. And that creates a value among the generations. So that is in the process of being repurposed. The only other building that we're repurposing is an old millwright building, or in his 50s, it was called just an old barn. And that will be our welcome center, which contains a museum of many of the artifacts that we found, the history of this land, but also attached to it will be a farmer's market where people can come and share either by selling or giving away. Because believe it or not, we got a lot of calls from people saying, I have so many tomatoes in my garden. What in the world can I do with them? And I like to be able to say, bring them to this storehouse and give them away to those who need them. Not sell them, but give them away if you so desire. We have additional walking trails, which are right now slightly over 2 miles, but our goal is to make it 7 miles of walking trail. Getting back to what Rue was talking about, success comes with additional opportunities. And our success in engaging with the community and actually having our 47 raised garden community beds in our community garden 100% tended by community residents is a blessing in disguise, because that left us with no other place to plant to support ourselves. Now, last year we received funding to help us get a high tunnel, which a big greenhouse or a hoop house is known by so many names, but it allows us to grow year round. And what we do there is we're right now working with a group. I tell you, we work with everybody. We're working with RAFI, R-A-F-I, which is Rural Advancement Farm Institute, I believe. Ray Jeffers, who actually is a farmer here in Durham, but also a North Carolina representative, and individuals from North Carolina A&T, and a host of farmers who decided to adopt us as a Help the Farmers Day. So on the 29th, if you want to enjoy something, come out and help us get that hot tunnel going. We have chickens, we have ducks, we have, talking about conservation of land, we last year created a hugelcultural garden, which is a no-till. It grew the best melons you could ever eat. I mean, they were so sweet, but I digress. We have a small orchard. And then our goal now is to clear that 2 acres of land. Why? Because we need a place to teach everybody and teach people how to grow the old-fashioned way, which I call is in the ground. And then Rue is helping us as well, because our goal is to help those individuals who are what I term as returning citizens. Yes, they were once incarcerated, but yes, you do not have to go back to the old things they used to do that got you incarcerated. And that is, if you're interested in agriculture, for 3 years, we will work with you to learn the basic principles and best practices of agriculture, how to create a CSA, a business plan, even basic customer service pricing, all of those things are instrumental in success. And then and I will say this, in 2021, 2022 and 2023, we had the entire Duke basketball team and their coaches to come out and help us build our youth garden. That youth garden is an outdoor classroom. They actually have 12 raised gardens bed there, a small greenhouse, large according to my standards, but a greenhouse, because we want to teach them as well. Because most of our farmers are aging out, and we need a whole new crop of growers, of producers, and we want to start with the young people. But in this garden, we're teaching everything from I call it my economic compassion garden. Okay, that's what I call it, because we're teaching young people the economics of agriculture, but we're also teaching them the compassion of it. And the compassion part is you don't sell everything that you grow. Give back to your community, give back to your family, give back to those who would love to be out there, but because they are less able than some of us, they cannot be. So those are the things that we're doing.
Hey, Delphine, don't
yeah.
forget to mention the food. You guys donate the food once a month, is it?
Yes, once a month. And the first one for 2023 is March 28th. We do a monthly food distribution. The first one is March 28th, right before the Easter holidays, for those who, well, you don't have to, but anyway, right before the big holiday of Easter, which is spring. In these food boxes, and they're already boxes, is all fresh produce that is grown in the state of North Carolina. Okay, and it supports local farmers, but also support those who are in need. It contains fruits and vegetables as well as protein, primarily eggs. What do we ask you for when you come up? We're glad that you come in to take what we have to offer. And those only thing that we ask you for is your zip code, how many are in your family, because that determines how many boxes you receive. Each box serves a family of 4. Uh, and then we ask you for how many people in your household are under age 18 and how many are over age 65. Why do we focus on those 2 age groups? Because they are the age groups that most likely are to face hunger and food insecurity. So we focus on those as well. But that's once a month, and it's done through a collaboration with the Farmers Food Share. So as I told you, if there's someone that we can network with who see our mission, who feel our purpose, who want to make a difference, we're there to collaborate with you. Now, I've just given you a snapshot of all that we do, but the best part about it is when you have new gardeners, young people, most of them under the age of 40, to me that's young, and this is their first time gardening. And they're out there, they're planting the seeds, they're listening, they're reading about it, the whole 9 yards. But then when that plant start coming up, you would think you would think that they had the biggest farm in America. But let that plant then have a small vegetable on it. There's such joy and celebration at that farm that you wonder what's going on. And when that I'm gonna use a zucchini or squash, but when it's edible and it becomes this long, oh my goodness, there's celebration and picture taking, and it is really something. So the joy that just comes from that is healing within itself. It is very healing. And to walk along the trails at Catawba Trail Farm along the river is even more healing, because you can sit there in peace. You can sit there and commune with your own self and listen to your own self. And in 2017, when we acquired this property from Triangle Land Conservancy, we didn't acquire it. All that we asked for was access. Give us access to be able to have land to teach people. I am proud to say that in 2024, we not only exceeded access, we acquired ownership. We acquired the deed not only to the original 53 acres that we had access to, but the entire 176 acres. Keep in mind, most of it will always remain untouched in its natural state, because that's the beauty of the land. It brings us to a whole nother looking even deeper at conservation and looking deeper at how to make sure that we live in harmony with the land, with the animal, with the air, with the environment, with the water that we all enjoy and need to live. So if you don't see my joy and don't see my happiness, it's because you're not looking, because I'm going to stop. I think I saw a hand telling me to stop. But thank you. Okay. I'm going to turn it back over.
If you can't tell, then, any of those 40, 30, 20 teenagers trying to keep up with the energy that Miss Delphine and her sister Lucille have, it's a struggle. I'm telling you, I slept well on Saturday afternoon. I had a little nap after I saw you out there. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about the class I teach, and if you have any questions, and Delphine, we can kind of make it even conversational. Rue, I don't believe you've been or Liz have seen much about what we're doing here. I'm going to share my screen. Likewise promise me I won't talk too much either. Make sure I get the right one. Here we go. See, I hope the slideshow will be popping up here in a minute. Can you guys see the slides there? Okay. One thing that Delphine mentioned also is nobody does anything alone. And even though this class was kind of my idea, all the work I'm be showing here, I barely lift a finger on it. Is my students that did all the work. So this is their work I'm showing here. So I want to make sure that you can see the students listed here on the bottom of the slide. I won't go through all of their names, but they've been a tremendously hardworking group of students, and some of them still maintain an involvement. Just this weekend, ZZ Newhard came out with me to help clean up the gravesite a little bit. So they still want to maintain involvement. The first year we taught this class, I have the students. Let me back up a half step. So when I first met Delphine and her sister Lucille and the rest of the team out at Catawba Trail Farm, we just had a conversation. So I said, well, this is the class I'm teaching. And they said, well, this is what we're trying to achieve out here. And over the course of talking, we kind of converged on an idea that my students could do for a project that would actually help them out. So since I was getting to know this area, I just moved back here after being gone for a long time, about 30 years. We started understanding what are the role of what's kind of the history of Black farmers and land disenfranchisement in this area, and also what kind of soils are we talking about here. We're kind of working on a hypothesis that which Black farmers still exist out there are probably not on the best land because of the history of land theft in this region. So the students explored this and created this beautiful poster, which I'm still impressed with. And they printed out a big copy of it. And I know Delphine and the team roll it out every now and then. Now Delphine, you rolled it out just a couple of months ago when you had a delegation from the North Carolina Senate come by, I believe.
Yes, I did. We were part of the I think it's called legislative farm tour, and
Right.
they were very impressed with this. I tell you, we are having people, even though it was based primarily on the Catawba Trail Farm, who we have given copies of this to. They want it. Can we display it? Do you have it in smaller format? And I often use this, especially when we're talking with groups and students about the land and all what it has to offer and why we plant this and why we don't do that. So it's wonderful. Thank you.
Now we
Yeah.
printed out a big format poster of this, probably about 3 feet wide by about 4 or 5 feet tall. And did we actually get that laminated for you? I can't remember.
Yes, you did.
Okay, so it's laminated so they can roll out when they need to. We also gave her the PDF because even though we did the work on it, it's actually information that we share as a partnership. So it's owned jointly by all of us. We talk about the geology in here, and the students, I believe it's also important to put science into a cultural context. They also looked at the distribution of using a GIS, where the highest population of minorities live in Durham, and their closeness to not only supermarkets so they can get fresh food, but also to farms that exist in the area. So that was our first project, and their final project for this one part of the class was this. This was their grade. Y'all got A's because it was a really good job, and the client was very satisfied. So I think that was helpful. But then, as Ms. Delphine mentioned, they also told us about this grave site for this William Johnston they have out there. And I want to point out again how Delphine is choosing to, and the whole Catawba Trail team is choosing to celebrate this site. Now, we could look at this as being a site of depression and mourning, and, oh, this is all the bad things that happened out here. I mean, this William Johnston she mentioned, he was a slaveholder. Let's make no mistake on this. And Catawba Trail eventually evolved into what was, I can't remember, Delphine, it was the South's largest plantation at Stagville?
Yes, 30, 30,000 acre plantation system, the largest in North Carolina.
In North Carolina. Okay. So I mean that's no joke. And they had a lot of enslaved individuals. People who were working the land without their consent. And that's something that's hard to deal with. But then depending on how you tell that story, working with the ancestors, including them, both the ancestors of the Johnson family and now that we found a ledger of the people that were enslaved on the property, the people who survived who are still survived, the family members of the ancestors, the people who worked the ground here against their will. It's really become a beautiful place of celebration, and I think it's really important. So we went out there and we saw this, the headstone of Mr. Johnson, which is really clearly here. But once we started moving around a little bit more, we noticed there's actually a lot of evidence for some other buried sites out there. So the next year for class, after discussing it again with the Catawba Trail team, we offered to do a geophysical survey. So along with my colleague at University of North Carolina, Mike Shore lent us a bunch of geophysical equipment that they had on hand there. We went out and did a survey, and the students created a 2-page report, again, that we were passed off to the Catawba Trail team in a way that's understandable. Now, this stuff is some pretty high-tech stuff. We want to make sure there was accessible information that they could actually then take. And either, they actually did talk to Delphine about the audience, one, for the people that come out there, the team, so they can explain it, but two, so they could also hand it off to people that they could fundraise for. So they could take this document and email it to potential donors and say, this is the work we're engaged in, this is our vision for the site, here's the evidence we have for it. So this report, you can see, has 3 kinds of geophysical data. I'm going to show you a little bit of this because I'm a scientist, I can't help myself. But we used 3 different tools out here. We had a lidar, which covers a very highly detailed map of the site. You can see here evidence of a tree that fell down on the site and other little bumps. There's logs on the site, trees and everything. And if you look real close, you can actually see rocks we believe are markers for the old graves. But then we also went out there and we took a ground penetrating radar tool and electrical resistivity tool. And all 3 of these, plus visual evidence we saw, converged on a story we believe is pretty clearly shown that there's some unmarked graves out there that really match up with what we believe are the enslaved people who have been buried on the same plot as the Johnson family, which is also interesting. So that was the second year we went through and we actually did the collection of the geophysical data. This past year, what the team at CTF and our students agreed to kind of converge on was now taking that geophysical information and present it to a larger public past Catawba Trail Farm. So working with a fantastic landscape architect at North Carolina State University, Kofi Boone, we're helping design an interpretive trail around the site so people can learn about the site itself, the history of the site, but also about how we know what's out there. So the students produced a report on that shows how we know what we know and kind of brings it down to kind of a public education type thing. One of the things I was most proud of my students this past semester, one student had the idea of taking the lidar data, which is some pretty hard stuff to look at. As a scientist, I see this stuff all the time, but the general public is a different thing. And he 3D printed it. So you can actually take that data and make it tangible. And you can see here, you can see evidence of a log that fell down here. This is an old tree stump. Here's an old trench that was dug probably, I don't know, 100, 200 years ago. It's still preserved that. It all of a sudden comes alive. And then children can see that and actually put their hands on it, touch it and say, okay, well, I can see that there, and learn a little bit about how we can use these different tools. The other big finding this year, because we're geologists, was actually quite fascinating. For me, this was the thing that took me from the, yeah, we think it's probably an old, these are memorials for an old enslaved people's burial ground too. Yes, this is a burial ground. My student Tate, who's got her nose buried in a rock right here, discovered that the rocks that are marking these old grave sites had to come from maybe 2 miles away. They weren't brought here by natural means. So that was a big finding. I'm going to show you some maps here. This is an aerial photo of the site. You can see a Catawba Trail Farm centered right there. The existing buildings are right here. One other student did a GIS overlay of this. We found a map from the 1950s that showed that even in the 1950s, this area would have been cultivated and probably something out there planted. I don't know, it could have been wheat or corn or something. Here are the buildings that still exist. They're turning into an educational center. And the gravesite is right in this area around here where these trees are. And then we overlaid the geology of this area, and you can see that turns out the geology shows that this is a kind of soil type that's very good for planting. So then when Delphine and Rue are doing their work on where to clean the land, this can actually inform that information better. Say, yeah, we got some good land for planting there. And as Delphine says, they can use the old methods of growing food in dirt because there's some good dirt they got out there. And finally, what I want to leave with is I want to show you how the rest of the community and the network that Ms. Delphine and the Catawba Trail Film has developed have been able to take our lidar data, sketch over it, make some additional sketches based on our findings of the area, and turn it into a beautiful interpretive site where people can come out there and visit, learn about the site, the ancestors of both the Johnston family and the people that were enslaved on the property can use it as a place to reflect on the hard work that all their families did to create this land and build up some of the wealth that we now appreciate the benefits from in our area. Again, this is the work by Dr. Kofi Boone at North Carolina State University and his students. They've done an absolutely fantastic job of coming up with a vision for how they can incorporate this into the vision of Catawba Trail Farms. So that's all I got for now. I'm going to stop my sharing here and pass it off to Rue, or if anybody's got any questions, I'll keep my eye on the chat here. Also, I know Brooke's got her eye on it. But as we mentioned, Rue's going to be working on expanding, going into a little bit more detail of the Catawba Trail Farm team's vision for a couple acre site that exists. It's right now covered in trees, but as you saw in the aerial photo in 1955, it would have been cultivated land. So think about how to make that land productive, not only for vegetables, but also for people and growing the community through that area. So Rue, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think when it comes to battling the Anthropocene and making it a little less scary, it comes down to a connection with the land that most communities don't have, or they don't have the access to, which is why I really, really appreciate working at Catawba Trail Farms. Even though my project is focused on what its future can look like, I can't look to the future without putting a lot of work into honoring the past and making sure that the past is embedded in the future. Miss Delphine has really helped me when it comes to thinking of what we can do with the land. I guess plainly put, she said, we want to grow things and we want to make sure people can say, this is what I grew, and also this is what I can do with it. This is what the indigenous people did with it. This is what the enslaved people did with it. It's this beautiful connection of we're still growing things to help support Catawba Trail Farms, but we're also growing things to honor the people who have been there in the past, to help inform the community and talk about the history of the land. So yeah, most of my project goes into first just stakeholder analysis and seeing who's worked with formerly incarcerated people, who's done similar things to what we're doing, and making sure that this is actually a sustainable thing. I don't want it to be something really cool and glitzy and glammy, and then I graduate and it disappears. I would really like to be really helpful to Miss Delphine. So for that reason, I kind of showed up at the farm one day and I was like, this is what I need to do to graduate. How can I do this in a way where I give you all my resources and this actually means something to you? So with that, I've been interviewing a lot of similar programs. I've been seeing how formerly incarcerated people, they can be financially compensated, how they can receive an education, basically just those like little projects that will keep them busy and help them grow. And then with that, of course, the finding what we can plant on the land and how we can use those. That gets into traditional ecological knowledge or ethnobotany, which I'm super excited about. But I've had a lot of fun looking at the history of the land. Again, as Brian was saying, the soil is good dirt. And so with that good dirt, we of course have an affinity for cotton, tobacco, your traditional plantation crops. But then I get to look into the history of those crops, as far as the enslaved people would use the roots for this when they had an ailment, or like they would chew up the leaves and do this when like there was a burn or something, and seeing how those plants were actually useful. instead of just how they can be shipped out on the plantation. And so I'm excited because this project is clearing about 2 acres, one for just agriculture and supporting UCAN, and then another acre for a native plant garden similar to the UNC Botanical Garden, where there are native plants, but you walk through the garden and you can learn about the history of the land, and you can see like what traditional pollinators were there, why were they there. You can see what plants the people along the Catawba Trail Farm interacted with. And it's just more than a community garden. And I feel like every time I talk about it, I don't do it justice. But it's this beautiful connection of using the land that was traditionally used to harm people, and it's healing them in a miraculous way.
And excuse me, I do want to add that the land, the 2 acres that will be cleared right now, we're in the process of identifying so that we can harvest and save all native plants that we cannot identify, as well as small trees that we can remove because nature is wonderful, and we need to honor nature as well. So if she took, and I always call her, but if she took this many years to grow this small plant, we should honor it and say thank you and let it continue to live. The other thing about the fields that we will be creating, they will have to be enclosed in a 10-foot fence because of the deer. But what we intend to do is throughout, we're working with another collaborator, I just want you to know, to plant fruit trees and nut trees throughout the remaining area so that we can feed the animals that are going to be displaced from this 2 acres of land. They need to be helped as well. So we're doing that, and that we're working with another organization, well, Leaf and Liam, because that's kind of like part of what they do as well. But we're working with them and some others like River. Oh goodness gracious, who don't we work with? To make sure that we harvest them all, students out of state, uh, you know, uh, all over, to make sure that we harvest and save those because they're precious. And hopefully there'll be some that we can even put back into the ground as part of the reentry program as well. So I just want to share that note. My goal is to do no harm. Okay, it's definitely to do no harm.
Thank you so much. I really is so compelling, I think, to hear the various ways in which Catawba Trail Farms has intersected with the coursework being offered at Duke and the student involvement that way, with this particular master's project that Rue is leading up as well. One thing I'd like to ask you all to reflect on it, and for those of you who have joined us, if you'd like to put your questions in the chat, we'd like to take those as well. But one thing I'd like to ask you all to reflect on, and perhaps Delphine, we can start with you if that's okay. One thing that I am consistently impressed with, and also you've emphasized today as well, is that you function through partnerships and collaboration, and you're our master of that, I would say. Absolutely. In what ways do partnerships, particularly with academic institutions like Duke, and with students and professors and the kind of resources and capacity that we have, in what ways can that move your mission forward at Catawba Trail Farms, and what's the power of that? And perhaps if you'd like to reflect on the challenges as well, we'd love to hear that as well. And then I'm going to move to you, Brian, and then Rue, to reflect on the same of what is the power and the challenges of these types of partnerships.
Okay. Well, the power is you all have so much knowledge. You have a wealth of knowledge that we do not have, and without you, we wouldn't know. And so it guides us. It guides us in, I wanted to plant over here, but no, that's not the right spot. I mean, even with the gravesite, we were talking about cutting down all the trees and, and people walking there, but now we know more. No, there are more graves there. So we need to make sure where we're walking and don't move those rocks and, all of that stuff. So the wealth of knowledge, additional knowledge that is shared with us, and then we can then in turn, if I might be so bold to say, translate it so that people can understand what we're doing. That's wonderful. The challenge, Oh gosh, what is the challenge is making sure that we have meaningful activities for people, for students to engage in, not just as my mom used to say, not just make work, but really work that makes an impact. So making sure that the needs of the students are met along as well as our needs are met. And I think that's a win-win. It should be a win-win. And
Can I
it
jump in
is.
here for
Yeah.
give you an
Mm-hmm.
example? So you
Mm-hmm.
don't know about this, Miss Delphine, but so we were out there on Saturday, and they had a group of students from the Duke Restoration Project who were helping with the native plant survey, and they just happened to come out by the gravesite, and we were kicking around out there, and they said one guy from Duke gets this big look on his face, like, "Whoa, that's a so and so tree." It was some, I can't remember exactly. It was some kind of viburnum that he's first time he'd seen on the site. So we started talking about it, and turns out now a group of Duke students contact me this morning saying that they want to go out there and do a survey around the grave site to see if any of those could have been planted as memorial plants around there, because they saw a bunch of different stuff out there. So these seeds you plant, Delphine, grow on past your thing, but there's all kinds of interesting questions out there, and the community will bring ideas also, as you well know. So there's because of the vision that the farm has, I think there's a wealth of information that we can gain from using this as a from I said using this as a site for learning, from us learning
Mm-hmm.
together on it.
Yeah. I tell you, and I gotta add this, when they showed me, oh, here's a persimmon tree, I almost fainted. Are you kidding me? Yeah, oh, this is not the only one we've seen. There's another one over here and back over there, and it's like, you made my year, not my day, but that made my year because I only thought there was one at the very entrance. And then we have a lot of volunteers and people moving stuff. Sometimes things get lost, and that one got lost. And it was like, oh my goodness, look at the smile on my face. And it made them happy, but it made me even happier to say, I love it. And we're working with, for example, even just locally with the master gardeners, and some people have come and say, okay, we're going to help you honor these trees, by putting appropriate tags on them so that people can know what this tree is, what it was used for, and it's going to be updated. You can do it with a QR code, or you can do it, just by reading a little snippet and going back looking at it. But it's education. People do better when they know better. So that's what we have here. So all I can say is thank you. Oh my goodness, I even do better when I know better. So, but to find those persimmon trees were absolutely priceless. Yeah, yeah.
Brian, would you care to reflect a bit on the power of these kinds of partnerships and for academic institutions like ours, and some of the challenges as well?
So if I can get kind of geeky academic on you for a second, there's a new buzzword that's floating around out there called transdisciplinarity. And a lot of people use that as kind of a fancy synonym for interdisciplinary. Now, right now, academia is all about interdisciplinary. You want to make sure we have the geologists that are working with the biochemists, and the biochemists who are, working with the mechanical engineers and that sort of thing. But you even have sometimes, if we're looking at something like mining, for example, you might have some geologists working with some economists or some political scientists. That's great, but it's still all within the academy. And while Delphine is right to give us some credit for knowing a couple things, we're not out in the real world. They talk about the ivory tower, and we can have a bit of an echo chamber if we don't get out every now and then and see the real world. So I love to get my students out there for two reasons. One, the real world has messiness that makes the theories we develop in academia challenged, because we can develop these theories and not really test them. You test them out in the real world, you say, huh. And once you get something that goes against your theory, that's when things get interesting. And it's really hard to find that unless you get outside your bubble. But the second thing about transdisciplinary that I love is it very deliberately, very authentically, and very meaningfully uses what they call extra academic knowledge. What it says is you don't have to have a PhD to contribute to what's the learning we have here in the academy. And I mean, that's the truth, where, Delphine is well educated. She's a professional. She's been out in the world doing this for years. There are people who don't have any credentials, who've been working the land for years, who know a lot more about anything that I would know about this stuff. Or even some people who teach agriculture at NC State University, because they know the land. They're out there every day. They know the changes in the weather. They know the changes in the soil types with different kinds of frost and and rainfall and all these kind of things that I don't even know about. So bringing that knowledge into our learning is critical, especially we come into this time where we're trying to understand how humans are impacting the way Earth in ways that are killing ourselves. So these people are the ones that see these changes happening. They're the ones who are navigating this change, trying to figure out how to make things work. And I can sit back here and say, well, I read a paper, I saw a chart, and that's just not helpful. The third thing I'm going to mention also, and I think this is something I try to get to my students, is when you have to get outside of the academy and realize you're dealing with real world people, you get better at communicating your science and to actually make clear communication of science. I mean, we joke, it's like, if I show up in a community and it's like, hi, I'm Professor Brian Garland McAdoo from Duke University, and I'm here to help. I'm like, okay, wait, I brought a chart. It's like, yeah, okay, thank you. But then you learn how to actually engage with people and learn how that works. It's another skill that we don't develop well enough in academia. So that's the benefit I see from my side. And the challenge I see, which is not related, is sometimes I feel like this can be incredibly extractive, where it's like, Delphine, I gain so much from every time I see you. I feel like I'm using you up, and I'm gonna, I'm like, you're gonna say, hey, McAdoo, enough one of these days. But the challenge I find is how to make it like, as she mentions, a teamwork. So we have to come up with ways of making sure it's a two-way street, where I'm definitely getting all kinds of knowledge from her and her team, everybody on the site. I think about Mike Nye and the kind of knowledge that Mike has out in that place. It's incredible. Can't learn that in a book because we're still catching up on things. But I want to make sure I'm giving back, and I hope that the kind of reports you produce, they can then take off the interpretive trail we're helping to build. That's some small way of paying back some of the stuff. One thing I think it's important to mention, and something that I want to put on the table also, is when Delphine will take an hour or two out of her day to give us a lecture out on the site and take us students around. I think it's important to recognize her knowledge in that and give her an honorarium, and she can do with as she pleases, because that's how we work in academia. If I have a colleague come in from another university, well, we'll fly him in, we'll take him to dinner, and sometimes we'll say, okay, here's here's an honorarium for you sharing your knowledge with us. So that also, I think, is in the spirit of transdisciplinarity. Now, I say that, and we don't always do it because we exchange ideas all the time. And I'm not always be like, oh, well, you told me that it rained last night. Here's $5. But so there's different times. It's kind of a struggle to figure out what's appropriate when to do it. But I hope because we can communicate well about these things, it's like we'll know when it's right. Did I do all right there, Delphine? Okay.
You did perfect.
Well, one more thing I can mention, Liz. Another challenge I see it from an academic perspective is, and this is going to sound awfully selfish, but time. And Liz and I have talked a lot about this, where if you're at a big fancy research university like Duke University, we don't get credit for the time we spend out there, get to know people, working, doing stuff like that. Because I should be using that time in the lab or producing papers and that kind of thing. But I think it's time well spent. One, because I learned things. Two, because I live in this community too. And I think the work that Delphine and her team are doing out there is going to help our larger community, which is essentially going to help me. And honestly, it helps me out too. I get great joy from going out there and being on the land. Like I said, I had a good nap on Saturday afternoon thanks to the work I did for you out there, Miss Delphine. So I appreciate you for that.
You're welcome.
Rue, what do you think?
I think you stole my thunder because that's what I was cooking up in my head. But I agree. First of all, Mr. Delphine, I don't know anything about farming. I'm from Houston, Texas. So that alone, you can't call us experts on anything, especially Catawba Trail Farms, because all I have is, like my Duke ID where I can log into the library and access papers for you. And I guess with that is the benefit kind of in that ivory tower. There's so much useful information that's locked away. But yeah, I guess kind of the downfall, I think, working with those academic institutions, and one that I even found myself getting caught up in at the start of this project, is that when we're taught about any example of anything, it's seen as kind of a static, like here is the problem, how are we going to move around that problem? And even at the start of this project, Ms. Delphine said, like, we are clearing 1 acre. What are we going to do with that acre? And I hopped on GIS. I looked at papers. I was doing my business. I was getting acreage. And then a week later, she was like, actually, like, we considered a couple things, maybe 2 acres. And that, I think I had to just take a break from my project. I was like, okay, well, I prepared for 1 acre and now there's another acre. What's going on? But working with this project specifically has really let me, I guess, dip my toes into the real world, and not just that little academic bubble of here is that one little problem. But I'm not dealing with this blanket organization of Catawba Trail Farms. I'm working with Miss Delphine. I see her face. I'm working with Brian and I see his face, and we talk and we communicate. And Brian's right. There's this ability to communicate ideas that is not taught in academia. And it's just a beautiful dynamic project that I think it's easy to forget when you spend enough time up in your little research bubble. But that's the only downfall I'm kind of scared of. Even I talk about Catawba Trail Farms every day, if I'm being honest. And then there's one class, it's where we go out and we volunteer basically. And it's maybe a class of like 70 to 100 people. And everyone, after my little Catawba Trail Farm speech, seemed really excited to go. And I got almost kind of nervous because I wanted to make sure they're actually being useful. Like, I don't want Catawba Trail Farms to be something that people are checking off of their list, or adding to their resume. I know when I talk about it, I try to put my everything into it and make sure I'm useful. But I understand some people see it when they're in their ivory tower as just okay, well, we can volunteer on this day and get this requirement for this class checked off. And I don't want it to become that. I guess I don't want it to become extractive. I want to make sure people are benefiting on both sides. So yeah, those are the challenges.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that reflection. Brian, I see your hand up. Do you want to go? And then I'd love to hear back from you, Delphine, if you have some reflections on what Brian and Rue have said.
Let me jump in here. Perhaps you can do this. I promised Jessica that I'd pass on her question about sharing a bit about beginnings of Catawba Trail Farm Project, how it got started. But I say that now, but if you can weave that in, maybe Delphine, to some of the things that we've been talking about before the time is up here, I'm sure Jessica would appreciate it. I'm sorry, I said Jessica, I meant Jenny.
Okay, definitely can. Let me, and in fact, that is really very insightful, because I wanted to say, even in regards to something that Ruth said, is with me in my thought process, and let's do this and let's do that. You always need someone to hold you back and to say, look, there's some limits that can be done. You're pushing us too fast. And that one is my sister. I'll be honest with you. That's Lucille Patterson, and we're sisters, we're co-founders. But as she says, I have the vision and she has the workability. And it's kind of like, no, Delphine, hold back, stop. And so you need that. But how we came about this property is, as the retired county extension director in 2016, I was getting ready to retire. And I served on the board of Triangle Land Conservancy. And basically, I feel like I ask you anything, you can tell me the truth. And my approach to them was, listen, this is my dream. I see so many disparities in Durham County. I see so many disparities everywhere I go. I see where people are being helped, but they're not helped with the right attitude of love and equity and value. So I want to start a garden. And they took me out to this particular piece of property. I should have known, but I did not know it was part of a slave plantation. But it was, as the kids tend to say, and I'm going to show my age because they probably don't say it anymore, it was toe up from the flow up. There were falling buildings, there was grass as tall as I am, there was trees falling down, everything. But I not lie to you, the moment I walked on this property, my first words was, I'm home. Have you ever gone someplace that you just felt like you're supposed to be there? That was this property. So that's how we got it. It took us a year from that day to come up with what we created, which was called a user license agreement, which is agreement to use the land for free. And basically no strings attached, meaning that I did not ask anything of TLC, no money, no information, no anything. It was one of those situations is if you give it to us, we will make it work. Okay. As the years progress, I think people, including TLC, saw what we were able to do with that property. And I became even a little bit more agitated because it was not our property. It just kind of gave me a feeling of some days depressed because I had asked for permission for everything. I had asked for permission to rebuild the trail. I had to ask permission to bring electricity on the property. I had to get permission to dig a well. And it's like, why do I have to ask permission for everything when I'm not asking anything of you but access? So to make a long story short, TLC brought in some consultants because they wanted to start what they call their Good Ground Initiative. And the consultants actually said to them, you have your Good Ground Initiative. You have urban community agronomics. You have UCAN. That's your flagship child for your new initiative, which is giving access to land and ownership to land to a BIPOC or marginalized individual. So moving forward again, it took us probably about close to 2 years to get through to where we are now in January, and that's ownership of this property. It comes with a lot of restrictions, which I don't mind. No, it would never be developed. That's not what I want in it, what we want. And our footprint will always remain within that 53 acres and not a whole lot of that even, because the healing and the beauty of this property is in the natural environment that exists and that has existed for some time. So I hope I answered the question. That's how we came about it. So now, we're the what you call it when the first one do it? We're the what's the word? The initial. Yeah,
Pioneers.
yeah, that's it. That's it. Because believe it or not, even before we even got to this point, I went to, because that's who I am, every conference I could go to, anybody that let me talk, I constantly talked about land trust organizations own lots of land. I enjoy a forest and a tree just as much as anybody else. But most of a large percentage of this land used to be farmland. Give a piece of that pie back to people. If you're sincere about climate change, the damage that we do, then allow people to grow and raise vegetables where we're decreasing our carbon footprint by driving stuff across the country or from another country or another world. Grow locally, allow people to grow locally. So my hope is that with this initial give, other land trust organization will follow suit and the TLC will also continue this practice. That has always been. Now, if I have a bigger dream, that's the biggest dream that I have now, to help others, because we need it. We need it as a world, we need it as a nation, and we definitely on a local level, we need it as communities to truly reduce food insecurity, increase health, but not at the expense of the environment that we all have to live in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will also thank you, Delphine, for those words and those thoughts. I will also provide a very sincere thanks to all of you for joining us today. I think just the reflections alone on the ways in which we can heal our world, right? And bring about change through collaboration, through partnership, through vision, Delphine, just to say, and through having a partner who also holds you back and holds you in reality to your to sisters of the world who do that. But I think especially reflecting on Brian and Mir, what you shared about the power of partnership with Catawba Trail Farm for our students, for our institution, and all that it provides in terms of inspiration, in terms of knowledge, in terms of educational opportunities and learning opportunities. Just to reflect on that, it's a powerful, powerful partnership and one that we have benefited greatly from. So thank you for that. Thank you all for joining us today. There is a link in the chat for a post-event survey. If you wouldn't mind, it's very short, and we would very much appreciate if you could fill it out. We use that to help guide our future programming. But again, I will just unmute. If you want to unmute and just give a yay, there you go. You all can unmute and just give a yay. Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you
Thank
joining.
you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.